How do we, so today is December 6th, 2004. We are on the Northern Michigan College campus in Traverse City, Michigan. I'm interviewing Eugene Dixon. Welcome, Gene.
Thank you.
And we have camera person Adam Merville, and Nick Blandon will be our recorder. I'm the interviewer. My name is Jackie Green. And welcome, Gene.
Thank you.
Today. Gene was born December 10th, 1929. And Gene, what branch of service did you serve in?
In the United States Marine Corps.
What was your rank?
I rose to the rank of gunnery sergeant. I was selected for master sergeant. However, this required an additional 2 years, and I was ready to retire in 1966. So I retired after 20 years service and declined the promotion.
And where did you serve?
Many places. I served in the United States at several posts and stations throughout the United States. Having been in the Marine Corps for 20 years, you would naturally be rotated around the country. I served in Korea, Japan, Okinawa, and in the Caribbean area as far as overseas assignments.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
No, I enlisted at Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1946. I had just turned 17.
And why did you join?
Growing up, my growing up years was I was in high school in the 1942 to 46 range, and that's when World War II was going on. I guess I was inspired by the servicemen and servicewomen I seen throughout the country during that time, and I guess I sort of decided that's what I wanted to do. Additionally, my brother Merle enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1943 and served on Guam and Iwo Jima. He returned in 1945 and was discharged.
Why did you pick the service branch you joined?
I guess I had a flair for good-looking uniforms at the time. My high school teacher, when I told her I was going to join the Marine Corps, had told me, said you couldn't even get into the Army. And that determined me more, made me more determined than ever. So I was determined to get in the Marine Corps one way or another.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Yes. I was in boot camp when I arrived at San Diego about December the 23rd. Just, by the way, that's a few days before Christmas. And I was greeted by a Marine sergeant, which to me, in my mind, was probably about 7 feet tall. And he quickly questioned me on my age. He asked me if I was 17 and if I was sure of it, and I said, yeah. And that was the wrong thing to say, because I learned right then, you're talking to a Marine sergeant, you're talking to one that's graduated from boot camp. Recruits always address them as sir.
Well, what did it feel like during your first days of service? What did it feel like?
Being Christmas and everything, probably things was a little lax at first for the Christmas holidays. However, shortly after that, we were put into a routine. That would be the routine the rest of our boot camp for about the next 8 weeks. It meant reveille at 5 o'clock in the morning, roll call immediately thereafter, and you shaved whether you needed to be shaved or not, and you shaved. And we grew into a routine that lights out at 10 o'clock, no noise, and that's the way that every day went.
Do you remember your instructors or any specific instructors?
Yes, I remember all 3 of them. Mm. They made an impression on the entire platoon. I would say probably when we graduated from boot camp, we all had a respect for them because we knew they had all been gone through this boot camp, plus they had all been World War II veterans.
Well, how did you get through it?
It was a struggle. Marine boot camp is not the easiest training to undergo. However, with the pushing of the drill instructors and a little bit of, I don't know what you call, determined on my part, I was going to get through it one way or another.
Well, we're going to go on and talk about your experiences at this point. Which war did you serve in?
I served in the Korean War at the beginning of the war and served exactly 1 year.
Where exactly did you go? And you're welcome to pull out the book if you wish and show.
We landed at Busan, Korea, which at that time, August the 2nd, 1950, the American forces and the South Korean forces only had a little portion of Korea. It's called the Busan Perimeter. It was just a little area, corner, in the southeastern corner of the peninsula of Korea, in the South Korea part. And it was only about 90 miles long and about 60 miles wide. And that's all they had as a foothold. Our unit, the 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, was used, in fact, the entire Marine Brigade was used to plug holes in the line when the Army or the South Korean troops would be pushed back. We would be rushed to that part of the battle line and have to retake the territory that they had lost. This was what the 1st Provisional Marine Brigade was used for during the first month, or the first 40 days of the war. That's what we were used doing. Just plug holes, retake territory that had been lost, or to hold the line to keep the North Korean Army from breaking through.
Wow. So that was your first job assignment?
That was our first action, yes.
Okay. One thing I didn't ask you, do you remember arriving in Korea and what it was like?
Yes, I remember. It was on August the 2nd. It was probably about 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, almost getting dark. There was a Republic of Korea Army band on the dock that was playing for us. They played the Marine Corps hymn, which made everybody spirit rise. But it was a sort of a fishy garlic smell, and I think that smell stuck with me during the entire time in Korea.
Did you see combat?
Yes, right from the beginning. Shortly after arriving on August the 2nd, probably about August the 7th or the 8th, we seen our first combat experience.
Were there many casualties in your unit?
Initially not at that point, just a few wounded, some KIAs, but they was very relatively small in casualty numbers. The casualty numbers would rise later on in August 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th. We were along the battle line called the Naktong River, along Obongi Ridge, hills 102, 107, and 109, I recall. These hills were taken by the North Korean Army, and they had to be held. Otherwise, if they broke through that line, all the rest of the Allied forces would be in jeopardy. And we did have a lot of casualties during that time. One of the biggest things, remember at that time it was in August, the temperature was 115 degrees and water was hard to come by. I can recall they had South Korean police, South Korean civilians. They were marshaled into a work detail and kept water supplied to the combat troops.
Please tell us about your job assignment. What was your job specifically?
I was a communicator, a sergeant at the time. I was a communicator, and we were to provide communications to within the infantry battalion, to the infantry companies, down to the platoon level, and we would provide radio and wire communications as needed and as able to do, so that they could communicate back to their battalion and regimental commanders. One thing I might say here, communications is key in any combat situation. If a commander cannot control or communicate with his unit, with his infantry companies and infantry platoons, then he cannot conduct war. As a result, we had to maintain communications. I'm sad to say we had to rely a lot on radio communications, because it was a fast-moving situation. You don't lay down telephone lines and expect them to stay there very long, because you're moving, the wires get cut, and it's not very reliable. At that time, today they have better communications, but that time it's all we had. And this is what my main job consisted of.
Interesting. Tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences.
Probably there's two. The landing at Incheon, we later, units from the States arrived and reinforced us, and we became not the brigade anymore, but we became the 1st Marine Division. And we landed in Incheon, Korea on September the 15th. September the 15th, and the 3rd Battalion of our unit landed on an island called Wamido, and they landed there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we came in at 5 o'clock in the evening after they had secured the island that's in the port of Incheon. We came in about 5:30. It was getting dark, and one thing that's very memorable about this was a really gamble on General MacArthur's part. You land at Incheon, and the high tide comes in about 5:30, 5 to 5:30, but then it quickly goes out. It was so devised that the larger landing craft, they were flat-bottom landing aircraft that would carry tanks, artillery pieces, and so forth ashore. They would land, and the tide would go out. This left them on a muddy bottom, and they would be stuck there until the tide came in 24 hours later. And this was quite a gamble on MacArthur's part, General MacArthur's part. But it worked, and it surprised the enemy, and it was a success.
Wow.
Now, if we want to go further, we later, after we landed in Incheon, we later took the capital city of South Korea, which was Seoul, and then turned that back over to General MacArthur and the then President Syngman Rhee of South Korea. He was reinstated as president in the Capitol steps in Seoul, South Korea, probably, as I recall, somewhere around the 25th, 26th of September.
Were you actually there?
Yes. I wasn't there for that ceremony. My unit was on the perimeter. We were not we did not see this. We knew it was happening, but we were out keeping the North Koreans away. So that was memorable. Now, I could go later to the Chosin Reservoir, which after we secured Seoul and our troops had reached the 38th parallel, we were prohibited from crossing the 38th parallel, because UN had not given authorization to continue north. We would be leaving South Korea and going to North Korea, and we did not have a mandate or any authority to do that. But eventually the authority did come, and we were allowed to go to North Korea, to cross the 30th parallel. However, even though we could not cross, the South Korean Army did cross. And they went across, and the North Korean Army was in full retreat, and the South Korean Army was right behind them. We went around on the other side of the peninsula and landed at Wonsan, North Korea, on, I think it was October the 28th, 29th. Quite ironic, when we landed, there was a sign there, "Welcome to the U.S. Marines." courtesy of the Republic of South Korean Army, a sign that was there on the beach waiting for us. They had already gone that far north. And then we proceeded to land at Wonsan, North Korea. And eventually, this was in October, and winter would soon be setting in. We were ordered to proceed north into up in a high plateau. It's an elevation of probably, I think, close to 4,000 feet, up a mountain pass, and we were to secure the territory there. And at that time, we were learning that the Chinese Communists had entered the conflict. We had Thanksgiving dinner. We had a great Thanksgiving dinner. It was hot food, but you had to eat it fast because it froze very quickly. It soon became cold. Snow was up on us, and we were on the western side of what is called the Chosin Reservoir. It's the Chosin Reservoir in North Korea. There's a little town of Udamni, it's called, and we were ordered after our Thanksgiving meal to go around the southern tip of the Chosin Reservoir and help the unit, the 7th Marines that was there, help them to go into the attack further to the north towards the Manchurian border. We pulled into Udamni probably it was after dark, not knowing anything about the area, not knowing anything about the enemy in that area. And we soon found out, as soon as we arrived there, that our lines had been cut behind us. After we came through, the Chinese Communists, with about 200,000 to 300,000 Chinese Communist troops, came in and cut our supply lines. They had us completely surrounded and was pushing back the army on our left and the army on our right, and that left them able to come around from the territory that the army had back from on the right and the left, and come around and get behind us. And we were cut off, and this was on November the 27th and 28th of 1950. We knew that we were surrounded because bullets were coming from every direction. Our artillery was arranged in a circle, and this told us a lot. Our supplies was dropped to us by air. Some of it landed on our target, some of it landed on the enemy's territory, but we were resupplied by air, and I might say we had to rely a lot on our aircraft for close air support. Of course, the Marine Corps had pioneered this after World War II and during World War II, and were considered experts in air-ground team warfare. And that was once we were surrounded, the decision was we had orders to attack northward to the Yalu River. However, this did not succeed, and some people would say it was a retreat. The Marine Corps don't call it a retreat. We just turned around and attacked in a different direction. We attacked to the south. Probably the biggest mistake the Chinese made was letting us fight our way back, because we would join another unit that was to the rear of us, and as we got back from Udamni to Hagaru, we joined another battalion that was also surrounded, but we became stronger. And from Hagaru we went to Kodari, and we joined another unit, and that made us stronger. And so we were able to fight our way out of the reservoir. But it took 35 miles of icy, snowy roads, temperatures 35 below zero, about 13 days to go through this area. We finally got out, and I'm happy to say on December the 10th, 1950, on my 21st birthday, I walked out a free man from the Chosin Reservoir, along with the rest of the Marines. We brought our equipment, we brought our casualties, we brought most of our KIAs. There were some that had to be buried in North Korea, and we are still to this day trying to recover those remains. Of course, the North Korean Army and North Korean government does not cooperating, and we have a problem there. And this is something that the United Nations, the American people, deserve to have done, recovery of those remains.
Were you ever a prisoner of war?
No. Fortunately, I was never close to being a prisoner of war. Not many Marines did become prisoners of war because they fought until they could fight no more.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
As unit, I was awarded. We were awarded the Combat Action Ribbon, which shows that you were under combat action, that you received hostile fire, small arms fire, and was subject to injury or being killed. During our time in Korea, our unit received 4 presidential unit citations from the President of the United States. We received a Korean presidential citation from the President of Korea, plus 5 combat engagement stars for combat engagements that I participated in during my year there.
Well, then how did you get those? You just told us how you got those. They just given.
Oh, okay. You earned them, and you were authorized to wear the ribbons and the citations.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know, with your rank, did you help with any of the planning or any of that sort of thing?
A buck sergeant don't get in on the planning. This is usually left up to the staff officers. Each unit has what they call a S1 officer, which is personnel. S2 is intelligence. S3 is your operations. He's the one that runs and your S4 is your supply. Your commanding officer, your battalion commander, and the staff officers, they do the planning. However, it's, for the most part, planned by higher above headquarters, usually by General MacArthur and his headquarters, right on down through division headquarters, to the regiment, to the battalion, and it finally gets down to you. And so in planning, no, you do the executing, and you may have some knowledge of what you're going to do, but it's limited at my rank level.
Okay, thank you. We're going to talk about life while you were in the service. First question is, how did you stay in touch with your family?
During the war, it was by letter. I know today they have cell phones, they have email, they have computers, but we had none of that technology with us there, and it was by letter. We only, probably during my time in Korea, it's hard to say, I'd hear several letters from my mother, father, from my sisters would write to me, but this is the only communications you had with the people back home. You had no knowledge of what they were hearing about the war, except, and you had very little opportunity to write them and tell them what was happening. Many times you didn't know what was happening, and many times you were too busy, occupied, to take the time to write.
What was the food like?
Food, it was sea rations for us, except on special occasions like we had on Thanksgiving dinner, that was prepared and hot for us. But sea rations, I guess the best way to explain them is canned food in cans. Some of it was franken beans, meat and beans, spaghetti and meatballs. These were all in a can, and then you heated them up and you warmed them up, and that's what you eat. You had crackers with your sea rations. You have cocoa bars. It always included a package of cigarettes for those that smoked, chewing gum, and a few sanitary things that come with the sea rations. That's all well and good when you're in a warm climate, but when you're in a cold climate, 35 degrees below zero, getting that food thawed, it becomes burned before you can heat it enough to get it melted. It was frozen. And I can remember using a can of C rations, picking one bean out at a time, out of a can of beans and franks, and you pick it whatever you could out a little bit at a time. For the most part, I lived on the cocoa bars. A little bit of candy was in it, and the crackers was in it, because it just wasn't feasible to warm up food for a couple of reasons: to get it hot enough, but then two, you didn't want to build a fire and expose your position to the enemy. So that's how we managed to eat. The food was good; it was nutritious for you, but getting it wasn't the best tasting stuff. But you could, if you eat it, you survive.
You were talking about it being so cold. What problems did that pose for keeping your feet warm and such?
Some of the weapons malfunctioned during the cold weather. They would freeze up and not function properly. That was the weapons. The communication equipment was the same way. We had what they call snow packs or shoe packs that had been issued to us when we went into the colder weather in North Korea. However, they were of little value. In fact, they were the cause of many, many casualties suffered by the Marines and the Army during that first winter in Korea. What had happened, they were sort of rubber, isolated boots. You walk in them and that's fine, except your feet sweat. And when you stop, your feet froze. And that caused a lot of frostbite. Many casualties. Many people lost toes, feet, legs, and other parts of their body because of the severe frostbite at 35 and 40 below zero. However, I still had a pair of what we refer to as boom doctors. Those were leather shoes, and I had earlier discarded the snow packs and went back to the leather shoes and leggings. We had leggings that wrapped around our leg and wore those, and I think this probably kept me from getting severe frostbite. I did get frostbite slightly. However, it wasn't anything that bothered me a great deal. It does today in northern Michigan. When it's cold, my feet let me know about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, did you have plenty of supplies?
Yes, we had adequate supplies. Mm-hmm. They got them to us, especially when we were surrounded. They got them to us the best they could. Mm-hmm. I don't think we ever were in need of food to any great extent. The main idea was getting it and being able to eat it, getting the water and it not be frozen. You could melt snow all day long in North Korea and get very little water. But we were supplied in each of our combat operations pretty adequately, I think.
Did you feel pressure or stress during that time?
Well, I think you're under stress and under pressure, whether you realize it or not. Mm-hmm. Most of us, at my level anyway, just took it one day at a time, and you were hoping to get out tomorrow, but probably the most important thing we could have, a sunshiny day. Then we could have our close air support. Our planes come in and drop the bombs where they need to be dropped on enemy troops and so forth. The weather in North Korea wasn't very cooperative in that respect. We had very few sunshining days. But our pilots, our Marine pilots, were there on station to help us when and if the weather permitted. It was a result of their support that enabled us really to escape.
It's interesting. Was there something special that you did for good luck?
No, I didn't do anything. I would say this, I wasn't a Christian at the time. I did pray to God to get me out of this and get me back to the States, and it sort of promised Him in my own mind that if He did that part for me, I would do my part and put the rest of my life in His hands and try to live a Christian life. And as far as any good luck charms, I don't think we had any.
How did people entertain themselves?
Well, when time permitted, well, I can remember a few of them struggled to carry a guitar along with them. They struggled to carry maybe a harmonica. And they would be, I can remember country music playing when we were in the areas that would allow it. If you were on the front lines, this was not permitted. But if you were in a rest area or in a back behind the lines area, then you could. But this was entertainment, or you might fake up some silly games, but there wasn't much entertainment.
Well, which leads me to the next question: were there entertainers at all?
There were entertainers that came to Korea, but I never seen it. Oh. They never got where I was. I understand Bob Hope was in North Korea, but I never seen Bob Hope. He wasn't in my area, but I'm sure the troops that did see him enjoyed him, because he was a morale booster. Even though we didn't get to see him, to think that Bob Hope came to Korea, this was a morale booster in itself, even though I didn't see him.
What did you do when you were on leave?
Well, we did come, if you're talking about on leave, there was no leave from Korea until I came home.
Okay.
When I would go, when I did go on leave after Korea and before Korea, I would go to visit my folks, my family, try to get around to as many of them as I could, but it never was enough time.
Well, where did you travel while you were in the service? From beginning to end, I suppose.
Well, I could start out at the beginning. From recruit to 1946, I went to Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego, California. After I completed boot camp, we had a brief period of mess duty, which is not really enjoyable duty, but you do the serving and cleaning the dishes for the other recruits after you graduated. After that, I went to field telephone school, which was about 50 miles away from San Diego, at Camp Pendleton, California, a little camp called Camp Delmar. There I went through communication school, basically field wire school. And from there I went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where I was working in base communications as a telephone installer repairman for the base and for the civilians and for the military families that lived on base or lived in housing off base. And that was my job in Camp Lejeune. I had often thought about being a commercial pilot when I got out. This was during my first enlistment. And I had thought I'd go to Spartan University in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I started taking preparatory courses through the Marine Corps Institute to prepare me for this. Well, I advanced in the courses, which was about 1,050 hours of study. And I was called to the Marine Corps Institute to be an instructor there, to instruct the course that I had been taking. So I was an instructor at the Marine Corps Institute until my first enlistment ended in December 1949. After that, I re-enlisted for 2 years to go to McAllister, Oklahoma. That was a naval ammunition depot, and it was close to home. My folks living only about 60 miles away, I'd be closer to them. But that only lasted for about 6 months, and I was ordered to the 1st Marine Division at Camp Pendleton, California. And in July 1950, the Korean War broke out in June of 1950. And in 1950, July, I think of the 14th, we set sail from San Diego for Korea, South Korea. I served in Korea for a year from August 1950 to June of 1951. I came back and was assigned to the Naval Communications Station in Washington, D.C. I was stationed there for a while until I was ordered to go to recruiter school at South Carolina at Parris Island, and I went through Marine Corps recruiter school and was assigned to recruiting duty in the Western recruiting area working out of San Francisco. I mainly was non-commissioned officer in charge of the recruiting substation in Stockton, California, where I served there until my tour was up and I was ordered to the 3rd Marine Division, which was headed for Korea again. However, Korea peace talks had started and they detoured the 3rd Marine Division to Japan, which where we went to Japan. I served there with the 3rd Marine Division, came back to the States, went to the 2nd Marine Division, which was in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, but it was only there a short time, and I was ordered to recruiting duty again, Traverse City, Michigan. I came here and served 3 years as a recruiter here in Traverse City. That was from 1955 to 1958. In 1958, I was ordered to Communication Chief School at San Diego. I graduated from there. In the meantime, while I was in Traverse City, I married my wife, the former Verna Orchid, and she became my wife. We had, after 14 months, we had a baby boy. But my orders were to go to San Diego, and we had quite a trip, taking a 2-week-old baby, crying, and all the way, I seemed like, to San Diego for 6 months of school. But we made it. After that, I was ordered to the 2nd Marine Division in Camp Lejeune, where I stayed there for about 3 years, and then I went to the 3rd Marine Division in 1963, which was stationed on Okinawa at the time, and I was there for a year and came back in 1964 and was stationed at the Instructor Staff in Rochester, New York. That was a place where we would train reserves, Marine Corps reserves, on weekends, and during their weekend training, 1 weekend a month. And I served there for 3 years, and I retired from there in 1966. Mm-hmm. That's it in a nutshell.
Oh, you've been a lot of places,
yeah,
Gene.
Yeah.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events that you'd like to tell?
I don't know if there's any humorous. I think the event of the Chosin Reservoir, when we were surrounded, getting through that, getting out of that, had an impact on my life in the future. I think it made me realize how fragile our lives are and how they can be taken away from us at any time. Especially when you're involved with an enemy that their whole idea on their side is to kill you. And I think this had an impact on my life. When I married my wife, that had an impact on my life. And later on, when I became a Christian, that had an impact on my life.
Thank you. Were there any pranks or jokes that people would pull in they were in the service, or
Oh, yeah.
anything that's memorable that you'd like to tell about?
No, I don't know if it's memorable. Early years, we always, people, you know, they take a rest when you're on a hike or something, and people are wanting to always give them a hot foot. That's mean sticking some matches in the soles of their shoe and light them and then watch them dance around. You had to be careful when you're doing that, because you better be sure he didn't know that you did it. And if he did, he was out after you. So little things like that you do to liven up things. It was funny at the time, probably silly and stupid.
Livened life up a little bit.
Yeah.
I know you have photographs, Gene. This is the part of the interview where, would you like to show some of those right now?
Well, I don't know. I guess I can.
Okay.
You want to be shown from here?
Sure. I believe. Can we do that?
Can you come in on this one?
Mm-hmm. And you can tell us who's in the photographs or what they're about.
This is a photograph of my recruit platoon upon graduating from Marine Corps boot camp in San Diego. We graduated in February, I think it was, of 1947. We started recruit training in December of 46, but our recruit training ended in February of 47. There's another one. This is when I went to field telephone school at Camp Del Mar, California. This is our class, and we graduated from there in June of 1947. This is a little dark picture, but this, when I got to Camp Lejeune, I was in base communications there, and we were issued our first set of dress blues. Now this is really a memorable day for us, because every Marine just waits for the day he'll get issued his dress blues. And that's when we got issued them, in 1948.
I like that one.
I'll give you some later pictures of this is a picture of me when I was recruiting in Stockton, California. Mm-hmm. I was there in 1952-53.
That was after you met your wife and you already had a baby?
No. Oh, no, that I met my wife when I was here.
Okay.
This was in 52 and 53. Okay. This was when I was recruiting in Traverse City. This is when I met my wife.
Okay.
This shows me giving the final instructions to a group of recruits leaving Traverse City to go to recruit training. And that's a group that I was putting on the bus here in Traverse City to go to Detroit for their final physical and shipment to recruit training. This is another picture of me when I was recruiting in Traverse City, Michigan. I think this was about 1958. We had in my office, at the time we were working out of the post office, in the basement of the post office, and I had a group of paintings that were Marine Corps paintings from World War II battles that the Marine Corps had fought. And I presented these to the Traverse City Library, which was on 6th Street, a much smaller library than they have today. Mm-hmm. This is a picture of my class when we graduated from Communications Chief School in June of 1959. This was about a 6-month course that we endured, learning all phases of communications, the command level, and how to write up operation orders and so forth, and deploy different means of communications. This is one of me, picture taken of me when I was in Rochester, New York, before my retirement. During this time, 1964 to 1966, the Vietnam War was in full progress. During that time, in the Rochester, New York area, we had an occasion to, a sad occasion I might say, to lay about 30 to 35 Marines to rest that had been wounded or been killed in Vietnam. This is a picture of them. This is a picture of the firing squad giving a final tribute to one of the KIs that had returned. On my, after returning from, after being, my tour duty at Rochester was done, I returned to the, I was going to return to retire and return to Traverse City. This is a picture of me taken at the time at Rochester, New York. And this is right alongside it is a Traverse City Record Eagle article on my retirement in July of 1966. When I retired from the Marine Corps, I had to go to work, real work, in civilian life, and therefore I went to work. First, I went to work for the Traverse City Post Office. Well, I'll take that back. I went to work for Tower Finance, which was on Front Street in Traverse City. And I worked at Tower Finance for a year, and I become dissatisfied with that job because it was nice to make a loan, but then you was expected to collect it. And a lot of people didn't want to pay. So that job didn't appeal to me. So I applied at the Traverse City Post Office, and I was accepted, and I worked there for about 8 months in the Traverse City Post Office. But during that time, an opening came up at the Grand Traverse County Road Commission, and I applied for that job and was accepted. They weren't too happy. Ed Burkett, the postmaster at Traverse City, wasn't too happy that I'd leave after just getting trained on 6 or 8 months. But I had a better opportunity at the Grand Traverse County Road Commission, where I went to work, and this is a picture of me and the commissioners at the time. I think this is about 1972, 73 era, the Grand Traverse County Road Commissions, and I was serving as personnel man and as a clerk of the board for the County Road Commission. My job in these meetings was to take the minutes, record the minutes, and sign legal documents for the Road Commission.
Oh, thank you for that. Do you want to take a little break at all?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay. Back from our break. Gene, do you recall the day your service ended?
Yes, I do. June the 30th, 1966. I had 4 boys. By that time we had 4 boys, and I had to move all of those back to Traverse City. We had decided to retire in Traverse City. And I had to move all of them, the furniture and everything. And our furniture did not get picked up and cleared from the house we were living in until about 5 o'clock in the evening. Well, we bundled those kids up and we headed for Traverse City, and we drove through Canada. On the way back, the kids were finally asleep. That's the best time to travel, and we were able to get back to Traverse City the following morning about daylight. And it was a hard, in many ways it was hard to give up the service, been with it for 20 years. But I was looking forward with anticipation to finding a job and going to work. Probably the hardest thing I had to break from the service, in the Marine Corps you're taught if you go outside, you always put your hat on. In the civilian life, you don't have that criteria, so I was always, when I got ready to go to work, or wherever, after I retired, the first thought, get your hat. And that stuck with me.
Thank you. Did you make any close friendships while you were in the service?
Yes, I made a few. Close relationships in the Marine Corps that I knew in the 1950s. You didn't develop too close a relationship to the point that you were real buddy-buddy. You still had buddies and people you could depend on too. But for anyone that might be under your control, you might have to tell him or give him an order to go do something that would cost him his life. And if you become too friendly with your troops, this becomes hard for some people. I do keep in contact with some of the people that I had served with. One I write to frequently with emails and so forth. In fact, I've got some pictures of his return trip to Korea in 2003 on my websites. I also communicate with one other man that went through boot camp with me in the same platoon, Gene Lovell, and I still communicate with him. He now lives in, I think, Columbia, Missouri. Leonard Shiflett, he lives in Virginia, and our families associated together quite a bit during our time in service.
Did you join a veterans organization?
I have been asked to join a lot of them. The Marine Corps League here in Traverse City and the VFW, and I have refrained from joining them. I spent 20 years in the Marine Corps. My wife endured that time that we were married, putting up with military life, and I had decided when I retired, and I wasn't going to subject my family to any more military life. Not that they did like it, but it was time to play the civilian role. And so therefore I have not joined any military organization, veterans organizations for that purpose.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
My first thoughts of the military when I went in at the young age of 17 was one of glory, one of girls galore, one of happy times and gay times and parties. Well, I guess I had part of that. I had a drinking problem when I was in the Marine Corps, and I came to the conclusion after Korea and after that prayer I said that get me out of this, God, and I will serve you. I came back to the States and I thought about it, and it took me 2 years before I committed myself. In 1957 I accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior, and I've tried to live a Christian life ever since. Probably the best decision I ever made in my life. I'm just sorry I didn't make it earlier.
How did your service, well, I guess that's how your service and experience affected your life. Is there anything else you'd like to share about?
No, well, I'm retired from the Marine Corps since 1966. I guess there'll always be a little bit of Marine Corps in me. I see the war going on in Iraq today and Afghanistan, and my heart goes out to the troops. They have better equipment than we had. They are better trained than we were. But life is still important to them as it is to us. And I think our country should say a prayer for each one of them. I think we should be mindful of the sacrifices they are making today, giving up their time with their family, sometimes giving up their lives. I suppose it'll always affect me when I hear of a Marine getting killed and when I see what happens in Iraq, but we should be there. We have a purpose for being there. And I think the people of Iraq will thank us down the line for it.